obviously is knowing the signs of dissociation when you see it. And sometimes that shows up in a first clinical interview. Sometimes that doesn't show up until much later, because a form of protection could be this whole, I'm a real with it together person. Talking can be dissociative if you're using it as the shield to kind of keep you from going there. But then once you get into phase 2 style exercises with a person, or you try a calm, safe place and they just go so far off and you have a hard time bringing them back, that may be the first time dissociation shows up. So of course you can have confidence in using things like the DES or the MID or whatever you may need if you feel you need that formal confirmation of it. But knowing the signs and symptoms, knowing how it may show up for a person, I think is a technical skill that we have to have. And I know I sound like a broken record, but once more, if you have an understanding of how you do it yourself, how others close to you may do it, you may be able to better recognize it in clients. The second real technical thing is obviously expanded phase 2 preparation. I've already kind of called out the calm, safe place exercise here. And I would say that it's actually a skill I don't even use sometimes in phase 2 preparation, especially if I'm getting a dissociative vibe from a person or I've done a DES, because I don't want to send them away even further, even though it is a potentially adaptive exercise. So when it comes to visualizations, I tend to stick with things like light stream and container. And the other big part of phase 2 is you better have a solid repertoire of grounding skills and to know how to use them with clients who may show some issues around dissociation. I mean, I think grounding is just a best practice anyway, even if you're not dealing with clinically significant dissociation, because if you're doing any kind of trauma work, there's some dissociation on some level. So being able to ground, being able to invite a person back to the present moment is an imperative skill. And a favorite working definition of grounding that I use is using all available senses to come back to the here and now. So that could mean making sure your office is a sensory paradise where people have things they can touch or even taste or smell, listen to, things like bells and music, clay, expressive arts materials, because part of that phase 2 work really needs to be doing a trial and error with the person to see which of these objects is most going to anchor you back to the present. I remember one of the first significant cases of DID I ever treated with EMDR. I noticed that he would look at certain objects in my office as anchors whenever there was this sense of just uneasiness or whenever a session was winding down. And I remembered that he was on my caseload when I was moving from one office to another. And I asked him before I moved, hey, I'm about to pack up my office. I'm getting rid of some stuff. Is there something in here that you really rely on seeing? And he goes, yep, that statue of the guitar man over there. That's what I look at when I need to be reminded that I'm here and now and in the room. I was going to get rid of the guitar man, so I'm glad I asked the question and glad I didn't get rid of guitar man. So in addition to playing with some different expressive arts materials or exercises, in addition to having a battery of multisensory things, this is where knowing some basic yoga strategies can be helpful. Mountain pose is one of my favorites as a yoga teacher who also does therapy to run through with my clients, which is basically a standing meditation. Obviously doing some mindfulness in a very sensitive way. So you're not going to have a person lock their eyes shut for 25 minutes and say, be here and now. But one of the features of trauma-informed mindfulness is letting people know that they can keep their eyes open. And that classic skill of look around the room and tell me 5 things you see, describing in great detail, is one we should be doing anyway, especially if you're working with clients with clinically significant dissociation. And then you can add the other senses to it. What are you seeing? What are you smelling? What are you, maybe even swallowing? Is there a taste in your mouth right now? Are there any sounds you're hearing inside or outside of the room? Maybe as you touch the chair or touch the clothes, what are you noticing with texture? So I think the key is having these skills in place. The better you build a relationship with a person, you can directly ask a question. What are some signs that I know you're kind of drifting off? And then once you see that happening, to maybe just go to one of these quick grounding skills, like look around the room, tell me 5 things you see. And when you're in the flow of EMDR reprocessing, phases 3 through 6, you can often do that without stopping everything and breaking the flow of reprocessing too much. If you start to see some of those light signs of dissociation, to look around and invite, especially if you've established which one of their senses is the strongest anchor to the present. So maybe you ring the bell, or maybe you have them touch the chair, or look around and say 5 things that you see. The other thing I really want EMDR therapists to understand is just because, especially when you're in reprocessing, just because you start to see a light degree of dissociation, please don't freak out. Because most of us who have this condition can process in a light state of dissociation. It actually keeps us safe enough to go there. But like with many things, it comes in degrees. And if it's clear that a person's outside their affective window, if they're flooding, if they're not able to connect dots, then obviously you may have to stop the reprocessing and make some more direct anchors and grounding before you either move to closure or start again. Another big technical request that I have for people in the EMDR community doing EMDR with dissociative clients is please don't ever tell a client you're here and you're safe. I did an article that is one of my most passionately personal soapboxes, which is please don't tell me I'm in a safe place. Because when you tell a client, and I am putting this out there because I know this gets taught a lot, that when you see a person start to dissociate, you look them right in the eye, try to make eye contact and say, like, you're here, you're now, you're safe. That's telling somebody what to feel. And that is fundamentally negating, potentially shaming, and ultimately kind of like, well, I'm not sure if I'm here or if I'm safe. And I know your intentions may be good in telling me this, but I do think it fundamentally shuts people down more than anything. So have the kind of core 3 best grounding skills established first in phase 2, so that if you are in the later phases and a person is getting drifty or floaty, or if it's time for closure, because I hear a lot is, well, what if I can't bring them back? If you understand their grounding profile, you'll be able to. But a lot of it is taking practice before you get into a lot of the heavier stuff with reprocessing. And then another thing I would want to say is if you have a fear of I can't bring them back, is have some other kind of safety plan in place for your assurance. Like maybe it's knowing that they can sit in your waiting room for a few minutes until they feel ready enough to go. If you're not sure how a person with clinically significant dissociation is going to respond in the first couple sessions of reprocessing, if it's possible, maybe you have somebody bring them. I remember when I was going through my first major round of EMDR in the summer of 2004, as a person pretty newly diagnosed with unspecified dissociative disorder, as a person who flooded easily, my therapist gave me the chance to sit in one of the other therapists' empty offices until I felt ready enough to go. And all I needed was about 10 minutes. I knew she had a sense that I wasn't going to like drop camp in there and sleep overnight, but she established it very clearly. This is just a place for you to sit and catch your breath until you feel ready to go. And there's a lot of other practical strategies you can use as well. I think every therapist ought to have a bowl of mints in their office, whether it's out in the waiting room or in your office itself, or other similarly tasting thing. Butterscotch can be another good one, where a person knows that that thing is in their mouth. And unless you have an aversion or an allergy to mint of any kind, you know that mint is in your mouth. It tends to have that very wake you up type of experience. And another good strategy that some clients and I kind of came up with for grounding after a session is to make a playlist. I use playlists quite a bit in my work, obviously being an expressive arts person. And a while ago, I was doing some of this preparatory planning with a client with dissociative tendencies who was going to be doing EMDR reprocessing. And I knew she had quite a drive home. And we were talking about music and music she liked. And my kind of assignment for her in between sessions was, can you put together a drive home from therapy playlist? So music that you specifically find empowering or grounding, or music that's going to wake you up. I find that's also a very good precaution.